fifth grade. So today we're going to be working on volume, and with volume we are basically finding the whole inside of a shape, kind of like this picture right here. So you may have learned about area before. An area is just kind of finding like the bottom floor of like a classroom, for example. So let's say our classroom is 20 feet long and 20 feet wide. So what I would do with area is I would do length times width. And so I would do 20 times 20, and that would give me 400 feet squared. So you may remember this back from a few grades ago, but that is how we would find the area. And this is just finding like that bottom layer, so like the surface area. But if I'm finding volume, like I said, we're finding the whole inside, so the amount of space on the inside of something. So if I am doing that, what I need to then solve for is volume equals length times width times height. So the first part of this equation right here is pretty similar to our area equation. We have area equals length times width. Over here we still have length times width, but now we also have this height component. So what we're going to have to do is multiply three numbers together instead. So we're going to see what this looks like. We're first going to be finding the volume with these things called unit cubes. And unit cubes, you can even see like they kind of look something like this. So we're basically thinking about, well, how many of these little cubes can fill up this shape right here. Now obviously these are way bigger than my pictures, but we can also use pictures and count the unit cubes as well to find our volume. So let's get started with this first problem right here. So our first problem, we have to fill in these blanks with, and I have it labeled on here. So going kind of backwards, we have our length. Going straight across is going to be our width, and going straight up is our height. And I'm going to show you how we can count our unit cubes. So what I'm first going to start off with is length, because that is the first number I usually need to find. So starting at the bottom, I'm going to count my dots, and sometimes that helps me just to put a little dot in the box. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you see that there are 5 unit cubes making their way back. Even if they're stacked and underneath a bunch of other blocks, we're still going to count them. So I have 5 cubes going back. So I'm going to fill in this with the number 5. Then I need to find the width. So I'm going to go across, and I'm still going to count my little cubes. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So my width is 4, since I have 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes going straight across. And finally, I need to find my height. So to find my height, I see how many boxes are basically stacked going up. So I have 1, 2, 3, so my height is 3. Now, you may notice that I did still count this block that I counted earlier when I was finding the width, and that is okay too. You sometimes may need to kind of double count your boxes. So when I found my width and when I found my height, I still counted this little block right here. So we're going to be multiplying 5 times 4 times 3. Now, what's great about finding volume is that I can multiply these numbers in any order I want because of the commutative property, and that is the property that lets me multiply these numbers in any order I want. So if 5 times 3 is easier for me to do, I could do 5 times 3, and then that answer times 4. I could do 5 times 4, and then multiply that times 3. I could do 4 times 3, and then multiply that by 5. I have lots of different options. But for right now, I'm just going to do 5 times 4, and that gives me 20. And then I'll have 20 times 3 left over. Don't forget about this factor that's left over, because if we just multiply the length and the width, all I'm getting is the area. And I want to make sure I get this height in as well, because that is what gives me my volume. So then I have to do 20 times 3, and 20 times 3 gives me 60. So my volume, now that I have nothing left to multiply by, is 60. But it's not just 60, because remember, units are very important for our answers. What I have is 60 units. So since I don't have an actual measurement here, like there's not feet or inches or centimeters or anything. Since I'm just counting what are called unit blocks, I just have 60 units. And then we have this little 3 over here, and this 3 means cubed. So when if I were to say my answer out loud to somebody, I would say that my volume is 60 units cubed. And if I were to write it, I would make sure I have this little 3 exponent up here. So you can see how our answers kind of look the same. We have an exponent on our area one as well, but that is only 2. So we have 400 feet squared, and that's how I know I'm finding the area. And when I'm finding the volume, I'll have units cubed with the number 3, and that's how I know I'm finding the volume of something. So let's move on to this next problem here. For this next problem here, we're going to be multiplying to find the volume of this figure now. And this figure looks a little bit different, but we're still just going to be finding the length, the width, and the height. So for the length, we're going to be counting this shape right here. So going straight back, remember, is how we find the length. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I have 5 going backwards. And then I count going straight across for my width. And if it helps you when you start doing your own shapes, you can start labeling your own shapes like this as well. So we have our width, which is 1, 2. And then finally, I need to find my height. So going straight up, and don't forget about this first box on the bottom. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I now have my length of 5, my width of 2, and my height of 4. And now I'm going to multiply all these numbers together to find my volume. So 5 times 2 is 10. And don't forget about our height. 10 times 4 is 40. And remember, it's not just 40 by itself. It's 40 units cubed. Now for our next problem, we have a much bigger shape that we have to try and work with right now. But it's still the same concept. So no matter how big the shape is, you're still just multiplying by 3 numbers. So to start us off, we're going to be counting backwards to find the length. So kind of moving on towards the back of the box. Say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have 5 for our length again. Now for my width, I go straight across, and our width is much bigger than the other problems. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I put a 5 right there, and then I find my height, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a 5 by 5 by 5 kind of shape right here. So what I'm going to need to do is I do 5 times 5, which I know is 25, and then 25 times 5. Now you may run into problems where you can't do the math in your head, and that is okay because you can always set up that standard algorithm to help you solve it. So I know some of these can be really easy to solve in your head, but sometimes it might be a little bit more difficult. And that's fine, just take the time to set up a standard algorithm. So 5 times 5 is 25, 2 times 5 is 10, and 10 plus 2 is 12. So that gives me my answer of 125 units cubed. And what that means is that my little unit blocks, 125 of them, would be set up just like this to create this shape. All right, we're going to move on to the back side now, and these problems are going to look a little bit different back here because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be finding the volume numerically. So we're finding the volume with numbers. So excuse Mrs. O'Meara's kind of poorly drawn shapes, but we are going to be finding the volumes of these shapes. So sometimes instead of seeing unit cubes, what you'll just see is a shape that looks like it just has smooth edges. There's nothing inside of them. And I'll have the measurements. And you have to then fill in the measurements and then multiply them all together. So these problems actually can sometimes be easier because it might already give you all the answers. You just have to know which one is which and then multiply it all together to find your units. So we are going to find first our length. So our length out of these 3 numbers is this one right here, because we're looking at this edge that's just going straight back. So 2 feet is our length. Then to find our width, we find the number that's going straight across, which is that one right there. So we're going to put a 3 over here. And finally, my height is the amount that the shape is going up and down. So my shape is going 4 feet up. Now, just like all the other problems before, I just need to multiply all these numbers together. So I do 2 times 3, which is 6, and 6 times 4, which is 24. And the only thing that's different from this problem is that my units are now changed up a little bit. So instead of having those units cubed, I now have feet cubed. And what that means is that I started with feet, and the volume of this means that I have 24 feet inside of this shape. So that is why it's cubed. So 24 feet cubed. So you want to make sure that the units here match up with the units that you started with. So let's move on to this next shape. For this next shape, we again have a nice shape drawn by Mrs. Amir here. So we have to find the length first. So remember that is just going straight back. So my shape is going 2 inches straight back for that length. Then I have to find the width. So my width goes all the way across the front of the shape like this. And I see that it's 12 inches. Then I need to find the height. And the height is how far up and down it's going. So that is, again, 2 inches. Then we're going to multiply everything together. So we have 2 times 12, which is 24. And then 24 times 2. Make sure you don't forget that last factor. Then 24 times 2 is 48. But remember, we don't want to leave our answer looking like that, because if we leave it like that, then nobody's going to know what our units are or what we were solving for. So my volume equals 48. I'm going to look at what measurements were we using. We were using inches in this problem. So I'm going to write inches, or the abbreviation for inches. And then don't forget, since we're finding the volume of something, we need to put this little 3 here, so that I know it's 48 inches cubed. And that lets me know that I was solving for volume. Another way you may see answers written out is you may see 48 inches cubed, and they may write it out in word form as well, like this. But either way, these are both correct. So whichever one you see, you know that that is an answer for a volume problem. So we're going to move on to the last type of problem that you might see. And what this says is find the missing factor. So what I have right here is 36 inches cubed. So what this means is I already know the volume of my shape. What I don't know is this missing factor right here. So I have my length, which is 3. And if you want, you could also draw yourself a picture. So I have 3 as my length. And then I have 2 for my width. But I don't know how high up my shape is going to go. So that is what I'm trying to figure out right now. Is this height number right here my height? I have no idea what that is. So to figure that out, what I need to do is I'm going to multiply these two numbers together right now. So I'm going to multiply this length and width. So I have 3 times 2, which gives me 6. And then what I need to think about right now is, well, 6 times what will give me 36? So I'm just trying to reach this number. Well, I could think about my factors that could multiply to 6 or multiply to 36. So I'm going to choose 6 times 6 because I know that 6 times 6 equals 36. And now what I just did is I just answered the question for what my height is. So my height is 6 inches, my width is 2, and my length is 3. And now I can finish drawing that shape. So that is where, or why we would do certain problems like that. And like I said, Mrs. Amir's shapes aren't the best, but you get the idea. So knowing the missing factor can help us finish creating shapes if we know what the volume is and we know what other factors might be. So 5th grade, this is going to be your volume notes for the next couple of days, so make sure you don't lose these. And you're going to be seeing different problems as you work on different worksheets where we're going to be doing unit cubes. We'll be doing shapes that look like this, and you'll be seeing these fill in the missing factors. Sorry, my camera's terrible. And finding these missing factors. So 5th grades, Good job today, and good luck on your lessons.